How can you communicate in a crisis when no one is used to work together?
So they used this donation campaign to reach out to the white collars, the one that were sitting at home comfortably doing their home office jobs.
Good Practices, a podcast about municipal response to COVID-19 from Connective cities.
Welcome to this episode of Good Practices, a podcast about municipal response to COVID-19 from Connective Cities, the platform for promoting an international exchange of experiences among urban practitioners. My name is Daniela Marzavan. In this podcast, we get to know different practical examples from urban practitioners from all over the world who developed measures to tackle the challenges posed by this pandemic. Co-host by my side is Beate Stender.
Hello.
She is a journalist from Berlin, and together with the Connective Cities team, she has researched the stories. So what story did you research for us today?
In this episode, we speak about a good practice from Bogotá, from Colombia. And we speak about a young woman named Magnolia Vega. She is the head of a citizen center in the local municipality of Bogotá, but she also did various things before.
Soy comunicadora social y magíster en ciencia política, con más de 10 años de experiencia laboral.
I am a journalist and social communicator with a master's in political science and more than 10 years of professional experience. I started out working for news agencies here in Colombia and then switched to the public sector. I've worked for different federal agencies and am now head of the Office for Communication and Citizen Services in an agency in Bogotá, the Economic Benefits, Severance, and Pension Fund, FONCEP.
De prestaciones económicas, cesantías y pensiones, FONCEP.
Yeah, FONCEP takes care of more than 11,000 pensioners in Bogotá. These are really old pensioners getting pensions since the early 90s. But anyway, we will talk about FONCEP later because we're having two good practices today. And the first good practice was a campaign named Bogotá Solidaria en Casa. And to understand the idea behind this campaign, we need to understand a little bit about Bogotá. You have been to Bogotá, right?
Absolutely. This is a very, very interesting city. It's so diverse. And to me, it's one of the most fascinating cities in Latin America.
Or maybe we should mention that Bogotá has more than 7 million inhabitants. So it's like, I think
it's huge.
It's huge.
And the people are so diverse. So depending on the district where you are, where you live, you get to know a different reality and a different face of the city.
What they say is that Bogotá is the city of no one. Can you explain me what that means?
I think probably the citizens of Bogotá don't have this local patriotism or this local pride, the elements that unify them. I don't want to say anything wrong now for the proud people of Bogotá, but from conversations with Colombian friends, this is one of the main insights that I can reproduce right now. So compared to cities like Medellin, Bogotá does not have that identity and that local patriotism.
There are also a lot of different municipalities in Bogotá. You have
how many?
About, I think, more than 60 districts. And
wow.
These 60 districts don't really work together. And I mean, kind of they do their own thing. And that was a big problem when the lockdown started in Bogotá in March 2020.
De ahí que cuando se conociera el primer caso de COVID-19 en el país en marzo, hacia mitad de marzo.
When the first COVID-19 case in Colombia was reported around the middle of March, it was one of the big problems we had as a district. All of us press officers were called together. There are more than 60 districts. And it was like, okay, what do we do now? This is a crisis and a situation without precedent. Never before in the history of the world did everything come to a complete stop, with factories shutting down, airplanes being grounded, and absolutely everything closing. That was the big unknown. No one had a plan, a manual, an example we could look to and say, this is what we have to do. So in our district, we started thinking 24/7 about how to communicate with the population. What is most important? What needs to be taken care of first? Of course, there were huge issues faced by the healthcare sector, the social economy, and so forth. But our job was to think about communication. So the question was, what do we need to communicate?
Esto en cuestión de comunicaciones, por supuesto, se imaginarán todo el tema de política pública y cómo manejarlo en salud, en economía social, bueno. Pero en comunicaciones el tema era ese. Listo. ¿Qué es lo que tenemos que comunicar?
So the topic of this episode is how can you communicate in a crisis when no one is used to work together? And for Magnolia Vega, the big challenge was how can more than 60 press officers from more than 60 districts can find a central theme? And what kind of central theme is this?
Lo primero a lo que se llegó fue generemos una unidad. Todo el esfuerzo.
The first thing we agreed on was to have a unified approach. All the districts, more than 60, really needed to concentrate their efforts on one thing. It quickly became clear that that one thing had to be preventative and self-protection measures. So we started producing clips that hammered into people's heads how important it is to wear a mask and to socially distance. That's still important today, of course, but back then people weren't aware of it yet. We broadcast that message absolutely everywhere. The Office of the Mayor gave us only one guideline. All media produced in the context of COVID, regardless of district or sector, had to carry the Bogotá brand. Why? Because we are only one administration and because all of our efforts right now are focused on this issue.
¿Por qué? Porque somos solo una sola administración y todo nuestro esfuerzo en este momento se va a centrar en eso.
It's interesting how Magnolia tells us how the branded content under, one unified brand called Bogotá has given people a sense of unity in this crisis.
Let's listen to, she said that they started to produce these video clips, and let's have a listen to the first clip they made.
Al toser o estornudar,
Cover your face with your lower arm when you cough or sneeze, never with your hands. If you are having trouble breathing or have had a fever above 38 degrees Celsius for more than 2 days, call the number 123 before contacting emergency services. In Bogotá, we look out for each other.
entre todos nos cuidamos. Alcaldía Mayor de Bogotá.
So this clip was streamed 24/7 in the local TV, in the local radio stations, and people could watch it online, in social media. But that was just the first step, because next to the hygiene rules, it was important to tell the people that it is very important to stay at home. And so Magnolia and her colleagues started a research why some people do stay at home and others don't.
Ese fue un primer momento en el que todo se fue a explicar la alerta amarilla, a explicar el simulacro en el que entró Bogotá.
In this first phase, the most important thing was to explain Yellow Alert, to explain the test run we did in Bogotá in the first holiday after the beginning of the pandemic. So we asked people on the street why they were outside and why others were staying home. We used surveys to try and find out what parts of the population were following the rules and why some people were not, and all in real time. The entire crisis management happened in real time. There just wasn't any time to learn or develop a strategy that was more thought out.
Porque tampoco nos dio el espacio para aprender o diseñar alguna estrategia como un poco más pensada.
So this was a management of crisis in real time?
It's an emergent strategy that develops during the crisis. And I think that's a common denominators to all the cities that we look at throughout the Connective Cities exchange events, that cities have really learned to deal with crises real time and to evolve their strategy through trial and error.
Yes. And Magnolia Vega said that the first weeks during the lockdown were really chaotic and demanding. But after communicating the people that they have to stay at home and to follow the hygiene rules, the next big challenge was already waiting for them. And that was the real challenge.
El segundo momento y esfuerzo fue cuando
The second moment and second big effort was when it became clear that this was going to last for a while. We quickly realized that we have to focus on education, on teaching people how to take care of themselves, and so on. And we realized that this pandemic would not be short-lived and would cause a lot of social problems.
esto se nos alargó y nos está generando muchos problemas sociales.
Here we have to mention that the lockdown in Bogotá was really hard. Really everything had closed. People had to stay at home very strict. They got special days where they were allowed to leave house. But on the stay-at-home days, you couldn't leave the house even for sport or going for a walk for 5 minutes.
And imagine the impact that has on the informal sector.
Exactly.
In Latin America, the informal sector, as we know, is one of the largest sectors. So all the people that were not allowed to pursue their jobs must have been in a very difficult situation.
And this is something that Magnolia Vega and her team did find out, of course, very fast. So in March, they had the first clip. And in April, she and her team produced a second clip.
Join us on Sunday, April 19th in the Bogotá Solidarity at Home fundraiser between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. 12 hours of nonstop solidarity in order to help those who need it the most during this quarantine. Go to www.bogotasolidariaoncasa.gov.co and do your part without leaving the house. Follow the drive on Facebook and on the Office of the Mayor and Canal Capital websites. Remember, stay at home and show your solidarity with those who need it most.
Alcaldía Mayor de Bogotá.
So they used this donation campaign to reach out to the people that were economically maybe not so affected by the lockdown, the white collars, the one that were sitting at home comfortably doing their home office jobs and probably did not fear hunger. So I think that's a really, really good call to use social media, to use Facebook, to use the channels that these people most consume, to reach out to them and ask for solidarity with the ones that are maybe in the informal sector and cannot pursue their jobs.
There were two more groups Magnolia Vega and her team were focusing. One group were school children. All the schools were closed for about 6 months, and some schools took a step into distant learning, but there were so many smart devices missing that, again, the city of Bogotá started a call out to donate used computers and tablets. And the other group they had an eye on were the people that don't use the internet. And these are the elderly people in Bogotá. For example, the pensioners from FONCEP. So the question for Magnolia Vega during this first lockdown was also, how can I communicate in my own municipality with all these offline elderly people? And I mean, we are talking about 11,000 people, and there's a simple answer. You have to call them one by one.
Entonces, nuestra llamada era, ¿cómo está? Lo estamos llamando el FONCEP, queremos saber si hay algo que la entidad pueda hacer por usted que no haya podido realizar en este momento.
We called them up and said, "How are you? We're calling from FONCEP. We want to know whether there's anything the agency can do for you that you haven't been able to do." And then we explained to them, "But look, you can do all of that in our virtual office." And a lot of people said to us, "But I don't have internet at home and I don't have a computer. I don't need one." This is a generation that grew up without this connectivity, so it's a little harder for them sometimes. But we also saw them get used to it.
Y a veces les cuesta un poco más. Sin embargo, vimos la adaptabilidad.
Yeah, and calling all these people was really working because I think they started in summer calling them, and until the end of September, they had reached nearly 10,000 people. And what they also did was they teach these people how to do the administration on the internet. And Magnolia Vega was very surprised that even older people do have digital skills.
Entonces encontramos que sí, como sorprendentemente,
So we were surprised to discover that people have this ability to adapt and learn. We're seeing all these things this atypical year has forced us into. It has brought changes not only in the decisions made by the public administration and its management of communication, etc., but also changes in the people. People we didn't think would ever become comfortable with this kind of virtuality.
a esta virtualidad, hoy nos han demostrado que sí se puede.
Listening to Magnolia's story and also to all the other good practices that we've heard throughout our virtual exchange events from other cities, it became clear how the role of the communication officers in so many municipalities are crucial in overcoming this crisis. One of the biggest learning is that you need to communicate on different channels to reach different type of people, especially in a city of disparities like Bogotá. You need to pick up the phone, you need to use the social media, the TV ads and posters to reach different kind of people. This was Good Practices, a podcast about municipal response to COVID-19 from Connective Cities. My name is Daniela Marzavan, and I was talking with the radio journalist Beate Stender about Magnolia Vega's good practice in Bogotá. Producer Beate Stender, executive producer Daniela Marzavan. Thank you very much for listening. We hope you'll be back for our next episode. Stay safe and goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by Connective Cities, the international community of practice for sustainable urban development, a joint venture between the German Agency for International Cooperation, the Association of German Cities, and Engagement Global Service Agency Communities in One World, commissioned by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development.